segment of the show, we're talking about that recent announcement by President Obama, which stated that there had been a decision made to begin normalizing relations with Cuba, and particularly that the talks had been going on with Raul Castro, the president of Cuba. Of course, he succeeded from his brother, um, Fidel. Fidel Castro, who coincidentally was the insurgent who led that overthrow of President Batista, and still, well, Peter is saying that he's still calling the shots on the down, but it's really quite a phenomenal action because I remember that embargo when the embargo was announced. I remember, of course, I was a wee baby, but to be alive when monumental occurrences take place, and this normalization of relations with Cuba, with all of the incumbent things that go with it, meaning more freedom to travel, the ability to send more funds openly to family in Cuba. These are huge things. But the thing that really, really interests me is something that was kind of almost a byproduct. A piece that I read that said that there will be an exchange of prisoners. And of course, immediately, what flagged for me was the very, very famous prisoner who is in Cuba in exile. Of course, I'm talking about Miss Assata Shakur. And I'm hoping that my special guest is going to be calling in to the studio at 8 o'clock to discuss. But if he doesn't, Peter G is here and we can have a pretty good conversation with the guests who are logged into the chat room. So if you've got anything to say, if you have any thoughts, and even if you want to call in and have your voice heard on the Conduit Show and recorded, then let me give you that number. It's 347 485 1154. That number once again is 347 485 1154. If someone could put it up in the chat room for me. So if there's something that you're hearing myself or Peter say about the conversation and you want to add your 2 cents, feel free to either put your comments in the chat room, or if you're brave enough and you want to have your voice aired over the airways of the Conduit Show and by extension the World Wide Web, then the number to call is 347 485 1154. And so the normalization of relations with Cuba to the point that they're going to be sending now a U.S. ambassador to have an office in Havana, or Habana, as they say. All right. Where are my Spanish-speaking people this Sunday evening as we're talking about, the repercussions and the changes that are coming down the pipe? The other repercussion, or people are flapping their lips and their tongues because they're now saying, if Cuba is going to be opened up for tourist travel, that means Jamaica get flop. I don't know about all of that. I do not know about all of that because at the end of the day, Jamaica has its own special cachet. And that, as the Jamaica tourist industry says, once you go, you know. Once you go to Jamaica, the magic, the mystic in the air grabs you. And it's a very, very special place. I'm sure that there will be an influx of tourists to Cuba who've hitherto not been allowed to travel unless you go that circuitous route where you can't go directly. You have to go through other countries where your passport is not stamped. Yes, for those who didn't know, you can visit Cuba. You just have to know the ways and means of getting there. So, I mean, do you think that will impact tourism in Jamaica? The people in the chat room, Roddy, Suze, Buck, China Nicole, who's in the chat room. I know Glenn from Blackpool had to bow out because it's like 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock for him in England. He's in Blackpool, but he was with us for a good time. So I want to give thanks for Glenn being in the chat room. Where's DLC? I thought he would have been in on this. And where is my guest who's supposed to be calling in? All right. So will the opening of Cubans' borders affect Jamaica's tourism? I think not. Peter thinks not to. So come in, Peter. What do you think? You want to comment? Come closer to the mic. Yes.
I don't think it's really going to affect the tourism in Jamaica because Jamaica on its own have its own culture and people are looking forward every year to go down to the different concerts and
Right.
activities,
The reggae.
And Cuba don't really have that as yet. I mean, people are just curious to visit Cuba because a lot of people. I have family there.
Mm.
You understand? But um, most people is not going to read. I'm not saying that they're not going to go as yet, but they want to know this thing put together and finalized properly. Because you don't want to, you'll come back and say, Mr. Say you go Cuba. What was
Right.
your purpose there?
And the hassle. Well, no, if your passport is stamped that you travel to Cuba, you actually you have an issue coming back with Homeland Security because travel between the America and Cuba is prohibited unless it's a medical mission or a cultural exchange of some sort. That's the reason that Jay-Z and Beyonce were able to visit Cuba. But in the normal course of events, you can't travel there lightly. Also, the fact that those people who have family members in Cuba will now be able to send more foreign currency. Yeah, Cuba has its own tourism attraction, but remember, Cuba is stuck in a time warp, so to speak. The buildings and the transportation hasn't moved on since 1962 when the embargo was first imposed. I mean, can you imagine one country imposing an embargo, financial and information wise, excuse me, and aid on another country for 50 years, right? And for what purpose? For what end? It didn't achieve anything. I must say, big up to Jamaica, along with other countries in the UN who actually tried to veto the embargo and stood firm in voting consistently to veto that embargo. And now it's finally as though, as was it Reagan who famously said, President Gorbachev, tear down that wall. So it looks like the walls now are being dismantled, but I'm very interested in this exchange of political prisoners. And this was the meat of the conversation this evening. Not sure where my guest is. I'm going to see if I can roust him up. But let me just read. And I'm talking now about Assata Shakur. She's the most famous political prisoner that I know of right now in Cuba. And there's an open letter from Assata. And the reason that I choose to read this open letter is the Conduit Show has always been about giving a voice to the voiceless. And definitely from the story that I'm reading, Assata Shakur's voice is not being heard. We're hearing everybody else's voice, but we're not hearing hers. So on the Conduit Show today, she has a platform, and her open letter starts like this. And this letter was written on May 3rd, 2013. I can't imagine that situation has changed, but maybe she is worried that she may be collateral damage and may be extradited to the US to face, to actually continue her sentencing for murder. This is her letter. My name is Assata Shakur, and I'm a 20th century escaped slave. Because of government persecution, I was left with no other choice than to flee from the political repression, racism, and violence that dominates the US government's policy towards people of color. I am an ex political prisoner and I have been living in exile in Cuba since 1984. I've been a political activist most of my life, and although the US government has done everything in its power to criminalize me, I am not a criminal, nor have I ever been one. In the 1960s, I participated in various struggles: the Black Liberation Movement, the Students' Rights Movement, and the movement to end the war in Vietnam. I joined the Black Panther Party. By 1969, the Black Panther Party had become the number one organization targeted by the FBI's COINTELPRO program. Because the Black Panther Party demanded the total liberation of black people, J. Edgar Hoover, who was then the director of the FBI, called it greatest threat to the internal security of the country and vowed to destroy it and its leaders and activities. In 1978, her case was one of many cases brought before the United Nations organization in a petition filed by the National Congress of Black Lawyers, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, exposing the existence of political prisoners in the United States, their political persecution, and the cruel and inhumane treatment they receive in U.S. prisons, according to the report. The FBI and the New York Police Department in particular charged and accused Assata Shakur of participating in attacks on law enforcement personnel and widely circulated such charges and accusations among police agencies and units. The FBI the FBI and the NYPD further charged her as being a leader of the Black Liberation Army, which the government and its respective agencies described as an organization engaged in the shooting of police officers. This description of the Black Liberation Army and the accusation of Assata Shakur's relationship to it was widely circulated by government agents among police agencies and units. As a result of these activities by the government, Miss Shakur became a hunted person. Posters in police precincts and banks described her as being involved in serious criminal activities. She was highlighted on the FBI's most wanted list, and to police at all levels she became a shoot-to-kill target. She says, "I was falsely accused in 6 different, quotes, criminal cases. I was eventually acquitted or the charges were dismissed in all 6 cases. The fact that I was acquitted or that the charges were dismissed did not mean that I received justice in the courts. That was certainly not the case. It only meant that the evidence presented against her was so flimsy and false that her innocence became evident. This political persecution was part and parcel of the government's policy of eliminating political opponents by charging them with crimes and arresting them with no regard to the factual basis of such charges." On May 2nd, 1973, she, along with Zaid Malik Shakur and Sundiata Acoli, was stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike, supposedly for a faulty tail light. Sundiata Acoli got out of the car to determine why they were stopped, and Zaid and Miss Shakur remained in the car. State Trooper Harper then came to the car, opened the door, and began to question them. Because they were black and riding in a car with Vermont license plates, he claimed he became suspicious. He then drew his gun, pointed it at them, and told them to put their hands up in the air in front of them, where he could see them. She says she complied, and in a split second there was a sound that came from outside the car. There was a sudden movement, and she was shot once with her arms held up in the air, and then once again from the back. Zaid Malik Shakur was later killed. Trooper Warner Forster was killed, and even though Trooper Harper admitted he shot and killed Zaid Malik Shakur, under the New Jersey felony murder law, Assata was charged with killing both Zaid Malik Shakur, who was her closest friend and comrade, and she was also charged in the death of Trooper Forster. Never in her life has she felt such grief. Zaid had vowed to protect her and to help her to get to a safe place, and it was clear that he had lost his life trying to protect both her and Sundiata. Although he was unarmed and the gun that killed Trooper Forster was found under Zaid's leg, Sundiata Acoli, who was captured later, was also charged with both deaths. Neither Sundiata Acoli nor her ever received a fair trial. They were both convicted in the news media way before the trials. No news media was ever permitted to interview them, although the New Jersey police and the FBI fed stories to the press on a daily basis. In 1977, Assata was convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to life plus 33 years in prison. In 1979, fearing that she would be murdered in prison and knowing that she would never receive any justice, she was liberated from prison, aided by committed comrades who understood the depths of the injustice in her case and who were extremely fearful for her life. The U.S. Senate 1976 Church Commission report on intelligence operations inside the USA revealed that, quotes, the FBI has attempted covertly to influence the public's perception of persons and organizations by disseminating derogatory information to the press, either anonymously or through, quotes, friendly news contacts. This same policy is evidently still very much in effect today. Moving along, I'm going to skip out some of this because this is quite a long letter, open letter from Assata Shakur. She continues, in January of 1998, during the Pope's visit to Cuba, she agreed to do an interview with NBC journalist Ralph Penza around the letter that she had written to the Pope about her experiences in the New Jersey court system and about the changes she saw in the United States and its treatment of black people in the last 25 years. Very kind of topical, really, because some people will say instead of going forward, we're actually regressing in terms of treatment from officials to black people in the United States, to some black people, some officials, the treatment of some officials to some black people in the United States. But of course, what happens to one, by extension, happens to all, because it could be any one of us that is placed in a chokehold or a legal takedown or shot and left to die in the street and left on the street for 4 hours, or shot in a dark stairway. I could continue and continue. Going back to the open letter from Miss Shakur, she goes on to say that she agreed to do an interview with NBC, but it's actually turned out to be, well, let her say in her own words. After years of being victimized by the establishment media, it was naive of her to hope that she might finally get the opportunity to tell her side of the story. Instead of an interview with her, what took place was a staged media event in 3 parts, full of distortions, inaccuracies, and outright lies. NBC purposely misrepresented the facts. Not only did NBC spend thousands of dollars promoting this, quote, exclusive interview series on NBC, they also spent a great deal of money advertising this exclusive interview on black radio stations and also placed notices in local newspapers. Like most poor and oppressed people in the United States, she does not have a voice. Black people, poor people in the U.S., have no real freedom of speech, no real freedom of expression, and very little freedom of the press. Black media, are you listening? What's left of you? Are you going to wait until there's nothing left? Speak out on issues that are relevant to us as a race. Everybody else does it, and nobody accuses them of having a chip on their shoulder. Let's not pander to what other people think about us. And that's Sheron Pearson speaking. Getting back to Miss Assata Shakur's open letter. The black press and the progressive media has historically played an essential role in the struggle for social justice. We need to continue and to expand that tradition. We need to create media outlets that help to educate our people and our children and not annihilate their minds. She says she's only one woman. I own no TV station or radio station or newspaper, but I feel that people need to be educated as to what is going on and to understand the connection between the news media and the instruments of repression in America. All she has is her voice, her spirit, and the will to tell the truth. but she sincerely asks those of you, those of us in black media, those of us in progressive media, those of us who believe in truth, freedom, to publish this statement and to let people know what is happening. We have no voice, so you must be the voice of the voiceless. Free all political prisoners. I send you love and revolutionary greetings from Cuba, one of the largest, most resistant, and most courageous palanques, maroon camps that has ever existed on the face of this planet. That, brothers and sisters, was an open letter from Assata Shakur, who is now in exile in Cuba, but with the news that there will be an exchange of political prisoners. I can bet your bottom dollar that she's going to be one of those political prisoners. And I wonder, in the light also of another political prisoner, Mumia al Abu Jamal, who was also convicted of murdering a police officer under very suspicious circumstances. Actually, Amnesty International said that Mumia's trial was not conducted under international standards, that it was flawed in that evidence was not presented to the jury, was not given to the defense. This man was convicted because, like Assata, they belong to politically progressive organizations that were doing something to change the status quo and to uplift their brothers and sisters. Do you know it was the Black Panthers who first brought in the breakfast program, which is now statewide or in New York City schools for kids? That breakfast program, that was an initiative of the Black Panther movement. Oh boy, that was a mouthful. So my guest is not here. So Peter and I are going to continue with this discussion. And what's going on in the chat room? What is the commentary? We have, okay. All right. So Suze is back again. Let me just scroll back up and see, okay, what the comment is. So are there any comments from any of the listeners out there in Radioland listening to this commentary? And I gave Assata Shakur a voice by reading her open letter. What do you think about what it is she has to say? And what do you think? Well, we know what her fate will be if she is one of those political prisoners who are exchanged. And I don't see the U.S. Giving her a pass. I think this was done to bring her back to serve her time. Do you think she will have the opportunity of having another trial? Peter, weigh in and what do you think about this?
I don't think so because I think
Can't hear you. Yeah, sorry.
I don't think so because basically I think Cuba has that no extradition clause. I think they treated.
Oh, you know, I think I pressed this.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. That was
I
nice
think
music,
now,
though.
yeah. I think Cuba have that no extradition thing, you know. So,
But they're in talks to
they're
say.
in
The
talk,
president
but,
said there will be an exchange of political prisoners.
we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll
I
see.
mean, as they say, Dag Nyamara Sopa, if she is extradited, because she's a convicted cop killer, and there will be no. I mean, Mumia was sentenced to,
Life.
I think, was it 30 years or life? No, he was actually sentenced to the death penalty.
Yeah.
And I think a judge actually, after several appeals, overturned that death penalty. The man has been in jail for 30 years without, his sentence was then life without parole. He's actually served 30 years already. And I don't know if all of that 30 years has been in solitary confinement, but a good portion of that time was in solitary confinement. So I guess there is no rehabilitation for certain crimes because I know, and not to be unfair, I know that Charles Manson is also still incarcerated. Not that I'm begging for him. He just got married too, so he does get some privileges. I'm not sure if Mumia has been afforded the same. Anyway, you got to love these stories that we're hearing, right? Charles Manson, the killer of Sharon Tate and other people. I think also maybe was that in the 70s, I think? But some time ago, he's still in jail. Was in the 60s, right?
60s.
Right. So Susie's saying she hopes that America doesn't spoil Cuba. I think this was one of the reasons for the revolution. If you look into it, that Cuba was considered to be the Las Vegas. It was Havana was a town of debauchery and lots of crazy things happening, and it was in a response to this defilement of the country. That was also one of the reasons for the revolution, to kind of kick out certain gangster elements who were taking over and running casinos and other nefarious activities in Havana at the time. So, very, very interesting. I mean, the world is indeed a changing. The world is indeed changing. And I think, Peter, you want to come with a track? Because I think the guests in the chat room are kind of just digesting the music that the letter, the open letter that we just read from. Yeah, I think it was a bit too deep, or it was a lot to digest. So the comments are kind of sparse, or maybe people don't want to get into the political aspect. But the pertinent things that she mentions, and which held true then when she wrote that letter in 2003, and definitely are still relevant today in 2014, as we are on the verge of the ending of the old year and the start of the new, which is we need media. It's very, very important that we have an outlet from which to tell our stories. The media that we see is so very biased many times, and we really need that outlet that's going to bring our stories without bias, without currying favor with advertisers. And, thank goodness for WBAI, one of the last bastions in New York City, progressive radio, NPR TV, but WBAI, where you can get some excellent programming. And one of my colleagues, of course, Mr. Ian Forrest, has that shift from 4 to 5, I want to say, 4 to 6,
4 to 6.
Every Monday, every other Monday. I'm not sure if he's on this Monday or next Monday, but if you can catch him, Ian Forrest always brings some excellent programming. So big up Ian Forrest, who's studying law at the University of the West Indies between Jamaica and Barbados. So big up yourself, Ian. You're overdue a visit back to New York. I'm not sure when you're coming back, but okay. I will send you the link for that letter, Colonel Ruddy Campbell. Definitely will send you the link for that letter. And there's more, because like the case of Mumia, the trial, there were flaws in the trial. But as we see, I will say, American justice, the law is an ass, A-S-S, or ass, as you would say. But I would say, coming from England, the law is an ass, because it's not the letter of the law. It's how you can manipulate the law to the best of your advantage. And we saw that with Ferguson, with what that prosecutor did in throwing away the case. So, if anyone out there is studying law, we need some law warriors out there for us. Yes. Yeah, okay. So I will also send you that link, Suze, that open letter from Assata Shakur as she went into political exile, to explain her side. We've seen every other side. We've heard the FBI story. We've heard the NBC News story. We see the news in the Daily Mail and whatever. But hearing it from the woman herself, it's always good to get that different perspective from other people who are involved in the story. All right, Peter, so I've chat up my latitude. I think it's time to play some music. What do you think? What have we got?
Yeah,
What have we got on the turntable?
Right now we're gonna play Wayne Wade.
Wayne Wade?
Yeah,
that's a voice I haven't heard for a while.
He did a remake of his song over about the Kenny Rogers song One More Time.
Okay.
Lady. So.
Okay, so then you know what? After that, I'm gonna play Ian Sweetness.
There you go.
Wow, nice segue. So press the button and make it start. is playing. No, it's initializing.
Lady, I'm your knight in shining armor, and I love you. You have made me what I am, and I am yours. My love, there's so many ways